Hello, everyone. I'm Gustavo Tolosa, and I am the host of the online book club that we have every week, where we read a different book every month or every month and a half, whatever it takes to go through a book, and we just visit. Feel free to type here in the chat section, and we can interact that way. Otherwise, we just I just go through the book and highlight some parts and discuss other parts. So we are reading Own Your Health. Yes, you can own your health. You don't have to let somebody else destroy it or own it. You can own it. And Glenn Mercer here does a wonderful job in easy words explaining how you can own your health. And I am so excited to see so many people logging in. That it's just great. I always tell you this, but it's very nice to see you all coming in and sharing this hour or 45 minutes that we have once a week. So I hope that you have had a chance to read chapter 6, which is a little dense in the sense that there is so much information, and but so good. I mean, I just wanted to read this chapter over and over and over again because I haven't read a chapter like this in other books. Chapter 6 says settled science. And guess what? Today we're going to have Glenn as a guest again. He and I have become internet friends because I've never met him in person, and we just get along well. So I asked him to join us. Yeah, okay.
Hi, Gustavo.
The internet magic has worked. So it's nice to see you, Glenn.
You can hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay,
And
good.
how about you?
Good.
Okay.
All is well.
All right. So I found out that today is a special day in Glenn's life. Everybody, it's Glenn's birthday. Okay. So I think this is double special because on his birthday he's making time to be here, so I appreciate it. And happy birthday, Glenn. How are you spending the day today? Is it good?
I'm spending it with you, and I'm delighted to be here. And come to think of it, there's a pandemic. There's no place else to go.
Yeah, where else? Okay, so everybody here is saying happy birthday, Glenn, and very good. Again, thank you. So everyone, I asked Glenn without knowing first that it was his birthday if he could join us today, because this chapter, if we go one by one, we could be here for 3 hours, and that's not the point of the book club. You have read the chapter, and it's a chapter that is full of study after study and nutritional studies. And I remember hearing Dr. McDougall say, it's settled. I mean, the science is settled. And there really isn't any discussion as to whether a plant-based diet is the diet that we should all be eating. And Glenn, you've done a really good job now really showing it here. And tell me a little bit about, or tell us, how did you think of writing a chapter like this, and did this one take a long time to put together, because there's so much in it?
Well, there's a lot of science, and so there are more. Did I disappear? There are more footnotes in this chapter than any other chapter. There are more scientific studies cited in this chapter than in any other chapter. But it's not hard to find the evidence. There's, there aren't any studies that compare the plant-based diet to the meat-based diet that find that people have less heart attacks when they eat meat. That never happens. So all the science is on the same side. What I wanted to do was to make the point that it's settled science, that we think of nutrition as being a controversial field because we hear about the paleo diet and the ketogenic diet and all these nonsensical diets out there, but there's no real evidence for them. It's always possible. A good lawyer can always twist the facts and present the case for someone who clearly committed murder, and clever scientists can try to make the case for a diet that's preposterous, but all the evidence is on the same side. So I really wanted to make a point that I had never seen before in print. You say Dr. McDougall has said this, and I'm sure he has. I haven't heard that, but I've never read before in print the idea that it's settled science. Let's just accept it and move on. So we know for certain that a plant-based diet is better for your blood pressure. It's better for your heart. It's better in terms of being anti-inflammatory. It's better for anti-cancer concerns. So it's better in every possible way. There are no antioxidants in roast beef, So, and the other thing is that the American diet is very deficient in one nutrient. Now, people worry all the time about protein, but we're not deficient in protein. If anything, most Americans have too much protein. There's one nutrient that we're deficient in, and I'll call it a nutrient, and that's fiber. And it's quite possible that the average American is only getting something like 5 or 10% of the fiber they should be getting. That's way, way, way deficient. And that's what leads to obesity. It's what leads to diabetes. It's what leads to heart disease, high cholesterol. So the only way to get fiber is by eating plants. There's no fiber in scrambled eggs.
Yes, no, correct. So, someone here is saying there needs to be a big public announcement about this. Well, unfortunately, the public announcement is going to be all of us, getting this information to your friends and family and posting these webinars in your social media. Because there is no money there's no money for potatoes, research and billboards about that. But what you said, Glenn, yes, I mean it's the methodology that they use for some of these studies can give any result you want, and I think you. And in the book here on page 86, you mentioned that. You said you can make the case of cigarette smoking or even heroin use with a methodology like that.
Right. And that was in response to a specific study that made headlines a little more than a year ago, I think it was, about 15 months ago. It was called the Red Meat Papers. And it was published in I think it was the Annals of Internal Medicine or some previously respectable scientific journal. And what the headline was, it's okay to eat red meat. We recommend continued red meat consumption at present levels. What they did with the Red Meat Papers. Can you hear me okay? What they did with the Red Meat Papers was that they assigned points. They didn't do a new study. They didn't ask people to eat one group to eat plants and one group to eat dead animals. They looked at existing studies. It was what they call a meta-analysis. And when they looked at the existing studies, they found that the existing studies showed that those on a plant-based diet live longer. Okay, so they gave that, let's say, 3 points. It showed that people on the plant-based diet had less heart attacks, less heart disease. All right, so they gave that 2 points. Showed that people on a plant-based diet had lower blood pressure. That was worth 1.5 points. Showed that people on a plant-based diet had better body weight. Give that 1.25 points. And then they decided, but, it's very hard to be on a plant-based diet. There's a lot of social factors that make it very inconvenient, like at a barbecue. So for the ease of use, we're going to give the meat-based diet 35 points. And that's what they did. They literally just assigned points, and they assigned more points because it's so much easier to eat meat. And that was published in a scientific journal. And that made headlines around the world. Doctors recommend continued meat consumption. Is that pure stupidity or what? But the media reports it like it's a scientific study.
Yeah. Yes. It's unbelievable. And it should make all of us just so angry and upset that not only this, but it's so disappointing that physicians who go through rigorous training and they're smart people, that they don't see or don't have the time or don't care. I don't know what to say. I think most of the physicians are caring people. That's why they became doctors and physicians. Their intentions, are to help. But it's like hitting your head on a wall, like many of the doctors that I have interviewed, that in their earlier career, they noticed that, 2 weeks ago or last week when we interviewed Dr. Lawanda.
Right.
Same way, the doctors they see that they don't improve. They're kind of monitoring the disease, the cholesterol and the diabetes, and they're managing, but they're not reverting it. And I don't understand. It makes me really mad.
Well, Steve Lawanda once told me that when his wife, when he was still eating meat, and his wife suggested that they listen to an audio book advocating the plant-based diet, and he started listening to it, his first reaction was, this can't possibly be true, or they would have mentioned it in med school.
Right.
They don't teach you anything about nutrition in med school. They're teaching you a lesson, and the lesson is, don't worry about nutrition. It's not important. You want to stay in good health, exercise and take drugs. They just discount nutrition.
Well, in one of the studies here, they mentioned, or you mentioned here, or highlighted that they say, well, it's too difficult to be in a plant-based diet, when in fact it's way more difficult to clean after the meat and to cook it. And it's just it's hard work. You have to be careful that you're not contaminating. I remember in my meat eating years, eating chicken, and it was like this horrifying thing. Like I felt like I was in a lab. I had to put gloves, and I had to have my disinfectants, because if you touch this, and that, and you don't have to worry about that with plants.
No. And once in a while, you hear a story on the news that they found E. coli in romaine lettuce, let's say. There's a recall on romaine lettuce. It's got E. coli.
Yeah.
And the media doesn't do their job very well when this happens, because they just make it sound like there's some evil lettuce out there somehow grew with E. coli in it. No.
Yeah.
E. coli, think of it linguistically, coli. It comes from the colon. It comes from the colon of animals. And every time, not 99% of the time, 100% of the time, 100% of the time that there's E. coli in romaine lettuce, it's because there's an animal farm nearby. It's because the water has animal waste in it. So the problem is always animal agriculture. The problem is never romaine lettuce. But the media doesn't report that. They make it sound like, gee, lettuce is a dangerous food. Right. Now we're suffering a pandemic now that probably is related to bats in China. And we've had swine flu and bird flu. Does anyone remember the zucchini pandemic? No, there's never been a zucchini pandemic, right? There's never a pandemic caused by a vegetable. It's always animal foods. And it's because the viruses that animals have, which are made much, much worse and more dangerous when the animals are in crowded conditions, spread to humans. So it's yet another, they call it externalities, the costs associated with animal agriculture. So, there are lagoons of animal manure, which causes a terrible odor, which lowers property values in the area. Well, that's an externality, right? It's a cost that society has to accommodate that's really caused by animal agriculture. Well, we're suffering an externality now of a pandemic that's killed millions worldwide and cost trillions.
Yeah.
So it's another animal agriculture externality.
Mm-hmm. I also another spot in your chapter here that was interesting was to see a study in which, well, no, I don't know if it was a study, but it was the what is it called? The association. No, it's not the word association, but the nutrition association. That's another Academy of Nutrition. Yeah, right. And how you said, how specific can they be that eat, a cup and a half of, some kind of vegetable or bean or whatever. And it's, where does that come from?
Right.
Where is the science?
Right.
The more greens. Oh yeah, that was one of the spots that you mentioned. Eat greens, but eat a cup and a half.
Right.
What's that?
Yeah.
So
they do this in order to make it sound like it's scientific. The reality is, eat as many fruits and vegetables as you want within reason. It's healthy food. Eat until you feel full. You don't have to have 5.5 colorful vegetables or 1.5 fruits or whatever nonsense. This is a recommendation that they pulled out of 4.5 of their asses.
Right. Yeah.
So, but they try to sound like they're scientists.
Yes. Well, and people maybe they do think that switching to a plant-based. I like saying plant-based because you also mentioned here how you can eat very unhealthfully on a vegan diet, and I know. I only have to go to a store, or a supermarket, or a health food store, and to see all this, junk, basically junk food made vegan. So you can't. So that's why I want to say, someone here is talking about it being a little bit difficult to switch to a vegan diet, but plant-based, it's just not. There are so many options. Many options. You have hash with a potato only. You have hash browns. You have mashed potatoes. You have potato salad. You have baked potato. It's you have potatoes with plant-based gravy. You have potatoes with sauté, spinach, and garlic.
And you have 50 types of potatoes.
And then you have
Purple
a variety of
potatoes
potatoes. And then you
yellow
have
potatoes.
the sweet potatoes, the wonderful varieties, and then all the legumes and grains. Anyway, it's I know that for some people that may not like cooking as much, perhaps as I do, because I find it such a creative activity. For me, it's like making a symphony of flavors. So, but it's not everybody likes cooking. So, but nowadays there are so many books, including your book here with the recipes that AJ has. Plus, AJ has her own book full of recipes. So nowadays it's pretty easy to make the switch, but what is difficult, and I don't know if you have experienced this, Glenn, is trying to switch to a healthier diet when your environment is against you. Have you had that experience, or was it always you alone, or your wife was always
honestly, I never had that experience because when I asked Joanna to marry me, she agreed to become first a vegetarian and then she became a vegan. And a couple times when I was in college, I lived in group vegetarian houses, one of which I wrote a play about. So I never really lived for long with any meat eater, at least not any meat eater who was central to my life.
Right.
But I know that's tough for people, and that's a challenge. In my opinion, you just have to say to your loved one, okay, if you won't come along, this is what I'm doing. You prepare your own food. But usually a spouse or other family member will be supportive and will say, okay, I'll try that at least.
I do know, actually, I have to say that I know quite a good number of people that have a spouse or kids at home, and they bring all this food, and of course it is tempting, and it is difficult, and I never knew how to answer that question very well, of how do you deal with that, because other than, like AJ says, just get divorced. But that's a little too much. But it's difficult when your spouse is sabotaging you, and in some cases maybe they're trying not to, but in other cases they really are trying to, for some reason, to make it difficult. So and again, like AJ says, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. So really try to get anything that is not compliant out of your house. Well, we diverged a little, but are there any studies here in this chapter that you personally that really caught your attention, or that you thought they were, I don't know, that is your favorite or your least favorite?
My favorite studies are the Esselstyn studies.
Yeah.
And the reason those are my favorite studies is that most of the studies on this issue of what's healthier, a vegetarian diet, a vegan diet, a keto diet, a caveman diet, whatever they call their diet. Most of those studies are self-reporting studies. They take 1,000 people who say they're vegetarians. They ask them maybe what they ate all day long. And 500 people who said they're vegans and what they ate. And 700 people who are meat eaters, whatever. And they report their results. And they follow them over time, and they follow their health metrics. All right, but some of those meat eaters may be eating meat twice a week, but eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. They might be on the good side of meat eaters, on the healthy side. And some of those vegans may be having vegan donuts all day long. So what does it really tell you? If, they're just categorizing people as vegetarians, vegans, and meat eaters, but it's not necessarily the case that all those vegans are on healthy diets. They could be having French fries and beer. So the Esselstyn studies, on the other hand, were with people with severe heart disease, people that the medical system had essentially given up on and said, get your affairs in order. And Dr. Esselstyn put them on the correct diet. He didn't just say, be a vegan, don't eat meat. He said, no oil, low fat, and gave them, even, I think there were even some meals that were provided sometimes, or cooking lessons or whatever. He gave them support. And they ate correctly. And by eating correctly, they achieved phenomenal results. Phenomenal. People who were expected to die within a year or two reversed their heart disease. So that's a real study. And it seems to me that if the other side wanted to do a real study to compare, the ketogenic diet or some other nonsensical diet with our diet, they would take a few hundred people who eat the way you and I do, and AJ does, and many of your listeners do, a low-fat, plant-based diet, and compare it against whoever they want to compare it against. But nobody does a study of people like us, because we would blow them all out of the water. Only Dr. Esselstyn has done that, and he's done it with people who are first transitioning to this way of eating. But they were compliant, because they needed to be compliant to save their lives. So in my mind, the Esselstyn studies are, just head and shoulders above all the other studies. If the study is just vaguely about being a vegetarian or a vegan, I'm not really impressed.
We will have, I want to mention that we were talking about having Glenn's wife, Joanna, do a cooking demo sometime in the very near future. For those of you who would like to see some recipes that will help with inflammation. But we're talking about that. So stay tuned. We'll do that.
I have an offer for your listeners too.
Okay.
Viewers. If you go to my website, the website of the book, which is ownyourhealthbook.com, you'll see a list of my other books. And on many of my books, I now was given coupon codes by Audible so that I can give out free Audible books, not of Own Your Health yet, unfortunately, but of, I'm pretty sure I have one. I have some for Mad Cowboy, with Howard Lyman, with No More Bull, Food Over Medicine, and my novel Off the Reservation, which is a novel about a vegan who runs for president. So if you want a free Audible book, a coupon code for a free Audible book, you can just write to me at gmerzer@aol.com. Maybe, Gustavo, you can put it in the show notes. And just put Gustavo in the subject line so I don't miss the email. And just tell me what book you want a free Audible coupon code for. And I hope it'll work, but I think these coupon codes will work. For years to come, whenever you see this video, just write to me. If you've purchased Own Your Health, I'll send you a PDF file of some of Joanna's recipes and Chef AJ's carrot cake recipe and a video of Chef AJ making the carrot cake recipe. So just write to me at gmerzer@aol.com, put Gustavo in the subject line, send me your proof of purchase of Own Your Health, and I'll send you those bonuses.
Okay. Glenn, just give us a little preview of the next chapter. We won't discuss it today. We'll leave it for
Chapter
next
7.
time. Yes. What it says comparative anatomy.
Yes.
What was your main goal there?
Well, the whole book is trying to make the case as in as reader-friendly a way as possible for why we should all be on a plant-based diet. So chapter 6 makes the case of all the scientific evidence. And it's overwhelming. All the scientific evidence is all on the same side. There are no legitimate studies, really, that advocate, that lead to the conclusion that we should be eating dead animals. Chapter 7 is about comparative anatomy, which is another way we can determine what we should be eating. You know, all animals in nature seem to know what to eat. But the human being, maybe this is how we should define being human. We're the only animal dumb enough not to be able to figure out what we should be eating. So the case in comparative anatomy is what scientists do is they compare all the physical characteristics of mammalian herbivores, mammalian omnivores, and mammalian carnivores. So they look at the gape of the mouth. You know, can we open our mouths the way a tiger can? Of course not. They look at the dentition. Do we have canine teeth? Not really. We have teeth that we call canine that are glorified molars, but they don't look anything like a tiger's canine tooth. So they look at the dentition, they look at the gape of the mouth, they look at the shape of the jaw and the jaw motion. They look at the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. You're going to have very acidic hydrochloric acid if you need to dissolve meat, but we don't. They look at the enzymes in the mouth. We have the enzyme amylase to digest starch. We don't have claws. You know, we would if we were supposed to be hunting animals. So they look at all the characteristics, and in every single one, with no exception, we're like rabbits. We're herbivores. You know, in every case, we just don't have. Not only do we not have the characteristics of carnivores, we don't have the characteristics of omnivores. We're just herbivores. Now, obviously, we're able to eat meat and live, but a cat can eat soybeans and live. You know, it's just a question of what's optimal. And the point of that chapter, on which I relied heavily on the work of Dr. Milton Mills, and if you Google Dr. Milton Mills, you can see talks he's given on this subject. It's just all the evidence is on the same side.
Yeah. Yes, it's not much to discuss. It's right there. It's just that it unfortunately is hidden for a lot of people. Glenn, have you ever tried fasting?
I used to, in my 20s, maybe a little bit in my 30s, sometimes I would fast one day a week, but I'm not a big faster.
Yeah.
I probably should fast more often than I do, but my wife is such a good cook. I've never wanted to.
It's hard.
For making a meal.
I think that Glenn will stop here and maybe let you.
I'm just putting it in the chat box.
Okay, go ahead, do that. And yeah, the Pleasure Trap is a very, very good book, and I also have a couple of webinars with Dr. Lyle and with Dr. Hawk where we talk about that. So you might want to look for those videos. And so here is what Glenn is writing. He says, send your request for an audiobook to gmerzer@aol.com, and let me know which audiobook you would like, and put Gustavo in the subject line. Okay. And check out www.ownyourhealthbook.com for a list of my books. I'm reading this because later on I will put it on the screen. So, well, thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, viewers.
Really appreciate it very much, very much. And we will see you all next week. We'll do chapter 6 and probably 7, and we're getting closer to the recipe section. And when we get there, Chef AJ is going to be our guest, and she's going to show us how to make some delicious, easy, and very tasty recipes. All right. Well, thanks again, and until next week.